This is the first four-wheel drive vehicle in the world. Built by the four-wheel drive auto company of Clintonville, Wisconsin in 1909. And this is the second, the Nash Quad. Welcome to the Off-Road History Museum in the Emirate of Sharjah, about 1 hour out of Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And this, the newest, the Jeep Gladiator. By special invitation from the museum's creator, His Royal Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Hamdan Al Nahyan.
With look, the glass on the top.
Gwynn and I were to be the museum's very first visitors.
In old days, the carriole, they have wood on the top. So we said we are in the 2019, we must have a panoramic.
With over 360 unique exhibits, not a single model duplicated, this new museum not only celebrates the history of off-road, but also the wonder of the solid front axle. I'm St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and then travelling to the remotest parts of the world. The museum is divided into 4 sections. Modified from around the world, the general evolution of four-wheel drive, military, and the history of off-road vehicles by the world's main car makers, featuring only those with solid front axles.
In general, this is a good example for off-road drivetrain.
This museum is a celebration of the best off-road vehicles in the world, and as you walk in, one of the first exhibits is this, and it's a demonstration of what makes an off-road vehicle great. And the components are a solid rear axle, 5-point, and coil springs, transfer gearbox with low-range gearing, coil springs in the front, and the solid front axle. The solid front axle is a big deal because, unlike independent suspension, solid axles keep clearance constant. They are far stronger and far better at carrying a load.
As you know, we make our museum for only solid axle, because solid axle is the off-road car.
Also advancing this message is this photo and inscription. Only one person at Jeep has ever suggested that we change the front suspension from the solid axle to an independent design. That person doesn't work at Jeep anymore. But taking pride of place is this behemoth. It's based on a 10-wheel drive Oshkosh military vehicle, and this one is fully road legal. This section here in the museum is all about modified vehicles, 4-wheel drive, 6-wheel drive, 8-wheel drive, and there's even a 10-wheel drive. And some of them are beyond extravagant. However, every single one of them are actually tried and tested. Some of them have crossed continents. They're not just showpieces.
In this building we have 2 sections, my modified car and general.
In the modified section is a mix of Sheikh Hamad's creations and some exceptionally rare originals, like this one. This is a Model T Ford 4-wheel drive. It was never put into production. I understand that only 3 pre-production prototypes were made, and this is the only one known to exist. But what some clever entrepreneur decided to do, that because the demand for 4-wheel drive was so small, it never went into production, but it was big enough for enough of them to order kits. And it was available for a short time as a kit to convert your Model T Ford into 4-wheel drive. In the 1970s, the Range Rover, of course, stole the headlines because it was such a unique design and a unique take on the station wagon with real, true, genuine off-road ability and good comfort. So Monteverde in Switzerland came up with a Range Rover look-alike. My guess is that the wheelbase was exactly the same. The door handles didn't quite fit, they overlapped a little bit. The doors likewise were very, very large, two-door, broad doors, and the interior really is remarkably similar in so many ways. But what made this better is that long before the Range Rover was available with an automatic gearbox, this one was from day one. It was called the Monteverde Safari, and there are very few of these remaining in the wild. How about this? This is a jerry can. It's a very big one. In fact, the pipe goes from here all the way down to the main fuel tank. So it's designed to confuse petrol pump attendants. One of the recurring problems I have when designing and developing overland trucks is to where to put the spare wheels, and I want to carry two of them. Well, here is a solution. For better, for worse, full bed, another one inverted on top. The interior volume is double. Upstairs there's a little nice patio. You can sit up there and have a drink and watch the sun go down. And of course, there's a place up there for the two spare wheels. Well, this then is the very first model of the Nissan Patrol. And in the Middle East, the Nissan Patrol is probably still to this day the most popular four-wheel drive vehicle. So much so that there is actually a model still built here, not available anywhere else in the world, which means that the exhibit has got a lot of Nissan Patrols in it. Although it looks it, that Nissan Patrol is not an original. It's in the modified section.
Then there's the Series 1 Patrol on a brand new Y61 chassis, engine, gearbox axle.
So that's an original Patrol body on a Y61 chassis.
And engine and gearbox and all the running gear.
Okay. So it's what they call a mod?
Resto mod.
Resto mod.
Resto mod.
But now this is actually quite a famous Patrol. Tell me about it.
This is the world's only 8-wheel drive. Front 4-wheel drive was built in Australia by Bob James at Australia 6x6. It was then shipped to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, where His Highness assembled it. We did the work to make the Ackerman angle correct, so as both the front axles
which steer the same
turn
track.
at the same track, exactly. So the history of this car, this one has a name. This one is called the Large Spider, which was one of the first in the Spider series that Sheikh Hamad envisaged. Now this is a Y61 Nissan Patrol with a undriven bogie axle. Well, it's not an axle, it's a hub. It's hydraulically, pneumatically activated to drop down onto the floor. It will then lift the front axle off of the floor if you're in a stuck situation or you wanted to change the wheel, and you can continue to drive. It doesn't go around corners.
But you can get out of a mess.
When you're stuck in the desert, this is primarily what it's for, Andrew. So as this wheel goes down and lifts the front axle off of the ground. So again, unique, one of a kind in the world. And once it's drives just like a conventional Nissan Patrol.
It's a Nissan Patrol chassis, obviously, and it's called the Blue Whale. Tell me about it.
It's a Nissan Patrol Y61 that was built in Rabat in Morocco at Sheikh's workshops there. As you see, it was Sheikh Hamad's interpretation of a forward control, and Sheikh Hamad wanted to show Nissan that the feasibility of a forward control vehicle was still very, very doable. This vehicle was driven from Rabat in Morocco all the way to Paris on the road. It demonstrates perfect road holding despite what you've seen.
This part, they like to call the general part, illustrates the history of the evolution of the four-wheel drive vehicle, and even has some very early Subaru. And Subaru, of course, was one of the early manufacturers that came to understand the benefits of four-wheel drive, even for an ordinary road car. I do wish, though, that they had paid more attention to the way their cars looked. This is the world's first military four-wheel drive. Again, made by the Four-Wheel Drive Motor Company. The military part of the museum is outstanding. From Russian vehicles, Pinzgauer, Bedfords, Dodge, lots of Land Rover, and even a 2x2. Competing with Land Rover were these little-known utility vehicles. This one is the Austin Champ. Sophisticated by Land Rover standards, it had a rev counter. This is a Land Rover 101 forward control. Basically, they took a Land Rover 109 chassis, adapted it, same suspension, leaf springs, solid axles front and back, but used Range Rover transmission and Range Rover engine, and it was very, very successful.
We have the M151 in a box. This is 85, brand new. The end when they stop building it, the end.
That's the final one.
Final one. I have two. One I fix it and one we keep it in a box from the factory.
The other Jeep that interests me as much is also in a box. The Willys G503, packed for military airlift in World War II. But this is my favourite section. Walking down the aisles is like paging through an encyclopedia of the history of the four-wheel drive. From Nissan, Jeep, GMC, Land Rover, Ford, Suzuki, International, Dodge, Mercedes-Benz, and Toyota.
Okay, my friend. Only a few days ago, because we know you are coming, we bring this one by purpose for you, because we know if you come without seeing this one, you will come angry. All these Land Cruiser without this one, it's impossible for you.
He's right, you know. For those of you less familiar with the channel, I have two all-time favourite four-wheel drives, and this Land Cruiser is one of them.
This is diesel, huh?
Yeah, I can tell already.
Maybe no diesel in it.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, only one in the world van. 4x6.
Oh, that's interesting. NATO Pintle Turkish.
Smell it.
And now,
Smell it.
you carry on. Counting down the history of these important vehicle manufacturers building four-wheel drive vehicles over the decades, it'll be easy to think, but you haven't included that, and you haven't included that. But what I'd like you to do is think about all of the that's. Do they have solid front axles? No. And that's why they're not here. Because Sheikh Hamad does not believe that they are off-road vehicles. And this is an off-road history museum, not a four-wheel drive history museum. So is this idea a bit eccentric? I mean, what's the difference really between solid axle and independent front suspension? Well, to a true four-wheel driver, any of us, everything. It means everything. And the first thing that comes to mind is a solid axle holds its clearance no matter what ground it travels over. It either holds it or increases it as wheels lift. With independent suspension, clearance decreases, and clearance is a fundamental necessity of good off-road performance. That's just to start with. The reason why there are fewer and fewer solid front axle four-wheel drives available to us year after year is because we don't ask for them. And the reason why we don't ask for them is that we don't understand the benefits of them. When I said this in a recent video, I say hats off to Suzuki for building an off-roader. Not an ordinary SUV, not a boring vehicle, not a dull vehicle, an off-roader, a proper off-roader that just happens to do everything else that one would do with an SUV really, really well. I meant it. Thank you, Suzuki, for keeping the dream alive. So how do we solve the problem? How do we make more of these things available to us around the world, you guys in North America? Why don't Toyota bring this absolute beauty to North America? Because you don't want it. Because you'll go and buy a Tacoma, you'll go and buy a Tundra, you'll go and buy any, you like Toyota, good car, sure. Independent front suspension, that'll be okay. You go to any of the major four-wheel drive off-road meets anywhere in the world, and the guys who are passionate, they're driving old vehicles. Why? Because they've got solid front axles and they rebuild them year after year. They keep them going, and the motoring manufacturers are losing out because these vehicles are all, look, how many 80 series, how many old 61, Y61 patrols you see driving around? They're everywhere. How many Defenders you see driving around? They're everywhere. Even Discoveries. How many new Discoveries do you see with really nice big fat tire, roof rack? You know the guys are going fishing. None. Not one. Because they're no good at it. The guys that are going fishing and towing boats and driving up mountains, they're driving older vehicles. And for the few of us who are lucky enough to live in countries like Australia and the Middle East, we've got a big choice. So what are you going to do about it? You are going to follow me on a quest. It's called #only front solid axle. And I want you to post and go mad posting every post you make on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, whatever you do. That's the new hashtag. We've got to do something about getting the motoring manufacturers to bring back. And if I see in my lifetime one motoring manufacturer bring in a new model and they bring a solid front axle back to that design, I will retire a very, very happy man. Please join me in this. Thank you for watching. See you next time.